let me ask you all a riddle. What has one eye that cannot see? The first thing you probably thought was, you, duh. Which true, that is a valid answer, but I promise this is not a trick question. There really is an answer. Funny enough, this riddle was the opening sentence of my college application essay. At the time, when I was applying, I did have two eyes, and since admissions officers didn't know how I looked like, it made me being an answer not that obvious. The essay went on to talk about my battles with a hidden disability and why I immediately thought of myself when I first heard that riddle. It's insane to look back at it now and see that it would become an actual manifestation of my future. Hello, everyone. My name is Ismail, and today I'll be talking to you all about how I had cancer for 2 decades and did not know. I hope that by the end of this talk, you all will have gained valuable insight into my cancer diagnosis and journey, along with future lessons that could be applicable to anyone when overcoming obstacle. Before going into diagnosis, though, let's backtrack just a little bit to 2002. When I was a couple of months old, my mother noticed a glistening white dot on my left iris. After taking me to the ophthalmologist, they told her that I needed to have the cataract removed in that left eye, or otherwise I'd become blind when I got older. Little did they know. After receiving surgery number 1, I spent my childhood wearing an eye patch that significantly weakened that left eye. While my right eye was dominant, I could still see out of the left eye and have memories captured on it that I still think of today. Fast forward to when I was 7, I was officially diagnosed with glaucoma in that left eye. And unfortunately, over time, my vision deteriorated in that eye as I was not receptive to the glaucoma medications, and I became blind in my left eye at the age of 14. At this point, the blindness itself did not bother me since I was primarily used to using my right eye to see. However, as the eye started to look more cloudy, this started to raise self-esteem issues and confidence. I did things like look at people from my right side or tilt my head a specific way so that people wouldn't immediately notice the cloudiness. But I pushed on, and I did the best that I could with all that I had. Surprisingly, I managed to keep my disability pretty hidden, and not many people knew I was blind. That was, though, until the summer of 2022, when a small bump appeared on my eye, right on my sclera. At first, I wasn't concerned about this actually, since I had something similar happen to me when I was 16 as a glaucoma symptom, and that was fixed with a simple laser surgery that lowered my eye pressure, which consequently made the bump disappear. Thinking that this bump was similar to that bump, I ignored it, and I continued on with my internship at Capitol Hill. By the end of the internship, though, my eye looked painfully sickly, and it was painful. I tried to seek out care in DC, but despite my best efforts, I just couldn't afford to be seen with my health insurance, and ultimately had to go back home to Minnesota to see my ophthalmologist. Upon examination, my ophthalmologist stated that she believed the bump was due to a thin spot in my sclera that allowed the interior contents of the eye to push out. Even with lowering the eye pressure, reconstructing the eye to rectify the bump would require many surgeries, and even then, complete restoration could not be guaranteed. At that point, I was honestly done. I did not want to continue dealing with a painful blind eye or multiple rounds of surgery. Little did I know what was to come, though. I did not want to deal with the eye that had random bumps growing on it, or to deal with the glaucoma symptoms I had dealt with a decade prior. In all honesty, the decision came pretty easy to me. I knew that I'd grieve for a little while, but I'd eventually move on with my life. I had made peace with removing my eye. A few days later, I underwent major surgery number 2, which was an evisceration of that left eye. This meant the removal of the interior contents of the eye, but still left the eye shell and muscles. A week after surgery, I went in for my post-operation appointment, where my ophthalmologist stated that during surgery, the interior contents of the eye looked normal, and that the bump seemed to be an external growth. She sent it to a lab, and it came back as a tumor for medulloepithelioma, an astoundingly rare and malignant eye cancer. Immediately, when I heard that, my chest tightened and I was struggling to breathe. I didn't know it at the time, but I was having my first ever panic attack. According to my care team and research, Intraocular medulloepithelioma is a particularly rare eye cancer with less than 60 documented cases in the world, primarily found in newborns, young children, and toddlers. Treating medulloepithelioma proves the challenge as there is no consensus for an efficient treatment plan. All the doctors on my care team at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, one of the top hospitals in the nation, had never heard of this cancer before. When I found that out, I was terrified. I mean, not only did I have cancer, but I had one so rare that even some of the best doctors in the world hadn't heard about it. Mentally, I was a mess. I had so many questions, and many had no answers. This shifted the immediate trajectory of my life, and as a planner, this chaotic state and the lack of control I had over it just put me in despair. My life was on pause. My body was going to go through so many changes, and I hadn't even had time to grieve my lost eye, let alone grieve the possible end of my life. When I realized this, I just told myself then and there, I can't let myself get into a depressive episode. I was going to have to fight the battle I was destined to fight, and I couldn't control any of the aspects going on, but there was one thing I could control, my mindset, and it was important for it to be optimistic and resilient. During treatment, I worked with geneticists to learn more about my cancer and figure out whether it was genetic or not. DNA analysis showed that my cancer was not hereditary and it possibly formed as an embryonic mutation. This was great news, especially in terms of having my own family one day and for my current family members not having to worry about carrying genes for this cancer. However, this furthered the philosophical dread of it all. Why did this happen to me? How did I encounter something so incredibly rare? Should I play the lottery at this point? Ultimately, though, this meant that I had this cancer for 2 decades as it was misdiagnosed as glaucoma. Why did it take 20 years for it to manifest and be diagnosable? Is there something in my body now that I could figure out later? Who knows? But I hope not. I've had enough surprises, I'll tell you that. Weirdly, though, I'm grateful that it took 2 decades before being diagnosed. My proposed treatment plan and the recent successes of technology allowed me to have a fighting chance at beating this cancer. The proton therapy radiation I received at Mayo Clinic at the time was fairly new, and according to my radiation oncologist, Mayo Clinic and Emory Healthcare were the 2 places to offer proton therapy radiation. What a coincidence. More than a year and a half later, there are now 44 proton therapy centers across the nation, with more in development. It's extraordinary to be living in a time where having a cancer diagnosis does not equate to a death sentence. Now, we can say some cancers are curable. After diagnosis, I underwent further testing, which showed that I had 3 more tumors in my lower neck under ear area. This progression put my cancer diagnosis at a stage 3, kicking off my cancer battle. I won't lie, when I found this out, this dampened my optimism a bit. It felt like every time I got over one obstacle, there were just 3 more to take its place. But I had already gone through so much that I just needed to do my part and see it all the way through. I underwent a third 8-hour surgery in September of 2022 for a full enucleation of that left eye, which meant removal of that eye shell and extra tissue, along with the removal of the 3 tumors. One of the tumors had wrapped around a facial nerve in my neck, and part of that nerve had to be sacrificed during surgery, causing a slight facial paralysis, especially in my chin, that I still deal with today. After completing surgery and its recovery process, I underwent 3 rounds of chemotherapy and 6 weeks of proton therapy radiation. I won't sugarcoat or minimize the effects of treatment. It was absolutely brutal. This was the most painful experience I had ever encountered, physically and mentally. Chemotherapy and radiation significantly weakened my body. My body was also going through medically induced menopause to hopefully minimize the risk of chemotherapy on my reproductive organs, and that came with its own symptoms. By the 3rd week of radiation, my throat was so swollen, I was dependent on opioids to eat and drink. By the end of treatment, I couldn't even open my mouth to speak due to pain. I had no voice, figuratively and literally, and it felt as if I didn't have any autonomy or comfort over my own body, and that made the experience that much more painful. By the end of treatment, the only way I was able to get through those last few weeks was keeping my mind blank, not acknowledging any grief, and just telling myself to try to get to tomorrow. Aside from the physical obstacles in this journey, the external forces playing in the background posed some of the more difficult challenges for me, actually. At diagnosis, I was a couple weeks away from starting my junior year at Emory, and it was going to be my first full year without any COVID-19 restrictions. Once I realized that I was not going to be able to come back in person, I immediately reached out to undergraduate advising, accessibility services, and my major advisor to figure out what the next steps were. I was not going to give up on school. I refused. Finding courses to accommodate my online learning proved difficult as Emory was pushing for 95% of courses to be in person that fall semester. On top of that, it felt like everyone around me was just telling me to take the semester or year off to focus on my health and prioritize self-care. While I understood that these sentiments came from a place of concern, care, and love, knowing myself and my goals, education is something that I love, and I use it as my beacon of hope. Having that taken away from me as well would have proved disastrous. To make matters even more complicated, if they weren't so already, I was not receiving any communications from accessibility services after I requested emergency accommodations in August. I had called, I had sent emails, and I even had a friend go on my behalf to see if she could get in contact with anyone, but none of those methods worked. I did not receive communications from accessibility services until the last day of November. At that point, the semester was pretty much done. Whatever accommodations I could get then would not have proved helpful. After speaking with my caseworker, he told me that this delay was due to overwhelming demand in the accessibility office, as he was responsible for a specific last name letter range that included students from all Emory schools, not just at the undergraduate level. There are 7 staff members at the Department of Accessibility Services. 7. For a school of almost 16,000 students. I want to take this moment to raise awareness of ensuring adequate support and funding for disabled students. There is absolutely no reason for me to have experienced what I did if Emory had provided that necessary funding to ensure that cases were being handled efficiently in a timely manner. This situation isn't unique to me, as many disabled individuals are often neglected, particularly in higher education. Disabled students, especially those with hidden disabilities, are often overlooked, so we must actively take steps to ensure that this doesn't happen and that we promote and create an inclusive, equitable, and equal environment for all. Eventually, I was able to bargain for and find enough courses to put me at a full-time student status. Being in class was the only moment where I could not think about what was going on in my life. Even though I was actively receiving chemotherapy infusions while in class, I still pushed myself because I knew that if I did it, I would wallow away in my sadness and wouldn't build myself up even if I had physically recovered. On December 26th, 2022, my cancer decided to leave me one last Christmas present. Right after finishing my last round of chemotherapy and 2 days after my last round of radiation, I felt very ill. I was admitted into Mayo's ICU, where I was being treated for a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot blockage in my chest, as well as COVID-19. I was essentially on my deathbed. I don't really remember much from that time period. It's really a blur. But one of the few things I do remember, though, was hopping on a Zoom meeting with a professor, Dr. Christine Restaino, to talk about her spring course and about the Italian Studies Study Abroad program. Like, isn't that insane? Why am I worried about study abroad and spring classes when I'm practically fighting for my life right now? I don't think at that point it was optimism driving me per se. I think it was just pure delusion. But somehow that pure delusion carried me through. And 5 days after being discharged from a 3.5-week hospital stay, I flew down to Atlanta to start my spring semester. Thank you. So, I tell you all this for a reason. At all the points and obstacles I had faced in this journey, the one thing that had kept me going was optimism, whether it was genuine or not. There were moments where I thought, what, this isn't worth it? Why am I even doing this? I might not even be alive to graduate. Yet, I still planned for my unguaranteed future with hopes that one day I would reap what I sowed and that it would all be worth it. And, if it wasn't worth it, at least I knew I worked hard until my very last day. Thankfully, my last day hasn't come yet. If that wasn't obvious. I can confidently say that I have benefited from the fruits of my labor. I have successfully maintained my 4.0 GPA and picked my life up from where I left off. 4 months into remission, I pushed myself to go abroad to that Italian study abroad program, and explored the wonders of Italy. Life inevitably throws obstacles towards our way. It's an inherent part of nature. People will give you advice, whether warranted or not. Take everything with a grain of salt and do what is best for you and not what others tell you you should do. As I plan to graduate in the next couple of months, I hope to continue my education in law school, where I hope to advocate for those disadvantaged and voiceless. I want to say that I'm so proud of myself and advocating for myself in those moments where I felt like no one was listening to what I was saying. I'm proud of the woman that I've become today, and I'm so thankful for my mother and my support systems who have helped me through this journey. Without having optimism, I wouldn't be here today giving this talk. And if there's anything you take away from this talk, it is that cultivating hope and maintaining that positive mindset will allow you to conquer those obstacles you're bound to go through anyways. Also, as for the riddle, because I haven't forgotten about that, technically, the correct answer is a needle, but they've drained so much out of me, I don't want to give them any more time in this talk. Thank you.